tooth of this year. But anyway, my name is Eric. I'm your host this evening with News Stalker, the FNL broadcast. This evening we've got some Benghazi news. We've got some civics news out of Arizona. We've got a little bit of space news. We've got some CISPA news. We've got phone lines that will be open soon. We had a call coming in earlier, but we're not going to take calls until the bottom of the first hour. The call-in number will be 323-319-NEWS. That's 323-319-6397. And News Stalker is, it's not political. It's not religious. It's not racist. What it is it's a broadcast that is doing or trying to do its best at basically showcasing how our news media in the United States of America is owned by just a few people, and that those few people are making a lot of money by not reporting certain things, whether it be impending financial collapse, whether it be booms and sinkholes opening up in unexplained areas, whether it be earthquake warnings in parts of the country that really shouldn't, that do not have tectonic activities going on, whether it be Benghazi, the details of that episode unfolding, whether it be the events of 9/11/2001, whether it be the assassinations of presidents or popular figures such as John Lennon. The list goes on and on and on. But we're faced with a daunting task at trying to use this little tiny megaphone to expose those with the big megaphones in order to get people to turn away, turn them off, and gravitate to things that are kind, loving, creative, empowering, knowledge, not belief, wisdom. And that's our goal. And I'm very pleased tonight to come to you. And then also I've got Cletus here in the house. Good evening, Cletus. How are you?
Good evening. I'm doing very well.
And you've had a pretty busy week, huh?
Yeah, this week, last week. Mm-hmm. It's slowing down a little bit. Next week will be a nice ride.
And you got some news for us, don't you? We're not going to get into it right this second, but you do have a little bit of news for us in front of you.
Yes, I do.
Okay. And one of the most interesting pieces of news is the executives committing suicide, right?
That one was quite eye-opening.
Yeah.
Especially after reading all those Deadpool stories. Right. This one kind of ties into that whole bit for me anyway.
Right. Did you catch the news a couple weeks back with the North Korean threats to the theaters and whatnot? And
yeah, I remember back when Team America came out and really went off on the North Korean government, and we never heard any threats against our safety or well-being when we go to the theater to go see that movie. It just seems that it's now this one because we need to bring down Korea. So I think we need to, or North Korea, I should say. So that I think they're just coming up with a story to get us to that point.
But you didn't get the memo.
I didn't get the memo. Oh, that it was all set up, that the FBI knew too quickly, and that everybody in Sony and all the other experts believed that it wasn't North Korea and they couldn't have done it by themselves. Yeah, I got that memo.
Right, the memo where they said it's a disgruntled employee.
Yeah, an inside job.
Mm-hmm. So if we've got a case where we've got a disgruntled employee that they're saying, I mean, they've come out and already said it, why would the president even need to talk about any type of internet regulations or controls? Does that make any sense? And in the same breath, they're tying this to the North Korean hack of Sony.
Yeah, but you only heard, so I think it's because we didn't really hear in the news a whole bunch of the dissenting view that it was an inside story. That wasn't carried over the airwaves so quickly. It wasn't pressed against anybody. It wasn't something that made it out in the news. The only thing that made it in the news was that we were hacked by North Korea and we were threatened by North Korea and we can't go see a movie and we have to stand up for free speech. And
well, you hit it right in the head. I'm so happy you did that because, so what you're saying is that they didn't equally, with their megaphone, announce that the North Korean hack really wasn't a hack and that it was a disgruntled employee. That's what I'm hearing you say right now.
That is correct.
Okay. And see, but they're banking on the American people still believing North Korea did some type of cyber attack. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a CISPA story in the news today with North Korea attached to it. Would you agree?
I totally agree with that. I mean, they're counting on the stupidity and the programming that they've been instilling in the United States. I mean, it's been our own propaganda.
Would you say it's stupidity, or would you say ignorance?
I would say ignorance.
Right, because they don't know.
Well, people don't know better. They don't know better than to be more concerned with the Kardashians' size of her butt than with what's really going on in the news.
But even that, I don't think America really cares about that either. I mean, I don't see that in the news all the time, to be honest with you. And unfortunately, I do have to watch it from time to time in order to see what the heck they're doing or what they're up against. But anyway, listen, that's an example of how something gets thrown into the news. It's there. Every news outlet jumps on it. We even have CNN making up holograms and going to elaborate lengths of displaying how we got hacked. Just like they did with the missing airliner. Just craziness. But at the end of the day, what we that follow this and go and drill down, what we end up finding out is that there was nothing to see here, folks. There was a possible disgruntled employee. We can't put the fingerprint on any nation, yet we were a minute to midnight in regards to dealing with North Korea. And we're getting ready to go into a little bit of a break here. Not too long, just some music. It looks like Ozzy is coming up. And when we come out of this break, I kind of want to open the phones up a little bit early. So 323-319-6397. This is your broadcast. You drive it, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to the News Stalker Network. We have a live show every Monday through Friday at 10 p.m. on the East Coast, 7 p.m. on the West Coast. Make sure you join us for that. When we don't have the show live, we're playing archived shows with some great songs in between, 24 hours a day.
Who is Cletus K? And I said, I am Cletus K.
If you listen on the TuneIn app or on Shoutcast, please do visit our website. You'll find links to like us on Facebook, to become a part of our Facebook group. You'll find links to email Eric or I or our manager, Diana. You'll also find our California business office phone number if you'd like to call during regular California business hours.
Yeah, you haven't heard anything recently about that plane
crash. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, any reason at all, waiting to hear back from give us a call during regular California business hours. If you found us, please stay with us. And most of all, please tell your friends. This is the News Stalker Network.
Yeah, AirAsia. And we still haven't seen one piece of evidence floating on the Malaysian Air Flight 370 that was lost. Yeah, it went down somewhere in the Indian Ocean. Yeah.
Hi, you look like a fucking Johnny come Johnny.
But there's a reason. There's a reason. There's a reason for this. There's a reason education sucks. And it's the same reason that it will never, ever, ever be fixed. It's never going to get any better. Don't look for it. Be happy with what you got. Because the owners of this country don't want that. I'm talking about the real owners now. The big, the wealthy, that The real owners, the big wealthy business interests that control things and make all the important decisions. Forget the politicians. They're irrelevant. The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. They own everything. They own all the important land. They own and control the corporations. They've long since bought and paid for the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, the city halls. They got the judges in their back pockets, and they own all the big all the big media companies. So they control just about all of the news and information you get to hear. They got you by the balls.
You're listening to the News Stalker Network.
And welcome back to News Stalker on the 16th day of January 2015. Thanks for being here, number one. Number two, I want to emphasize the reason that News Stalker is here is to point out and to highlight the lies, the sheer manipulation, the paralyzing effects that it has on the millions that are watching the mainline news. Basically carry out their charade. I mean, they've got the power of the microphone, which leads into the video, which leads into every home, across the internet, across all bandwidth. And what we end up getting is garbage like this.
The show, I scream, you scream. You know the rest.
I scream, you scream, you know the rest.
I scream, you scream, you know the rest. I scream, you scream, you know the rest. Well, I scream, you scream, you know the rest. I scream, you scream, well, you know the rest.
I scream, you scream, well, you know the rest. I scream, you scream, well, you know the rest.
I scream, you scream, you know the rest. I scream, you scream, we all know the rest.
Okay, I'm not going to continue that too much longer, but the reason is because it's evident. There's an example. There's right there. We just did 10 different stations on the same day, basically choreographed. These are local stations. These are not huge networks. And so there's somebody that is controlling the output of news. Now, we had on this broadcast Bill Dean, a 26-year veteran of CBS. He was a assignment editor for CBS for 26 years. He retired in 2006. On 9/11 of 2001, he was in Manhattan, and he never heard of Building 7 falling. Yeah, we discovered that on this show. We also discovered from Bill Dean himself, which we'll have him on here in the next few weeks, we uncovered that unless it hits the AP wire, it does not go on the news. That's protocol. That's what all the stations do. So, for all intents and purposes, all we really have to do is look at the AP wire now, isn't it? Doesn't matter what you're watching. They're going to spin it whichever flavor that you may gravitate to. I guess if you're conservative, you're going to be more apt to watch Fox News or be lied to by Fox News. If you're a liberal, you're probably more apt to watch MSNBC or CNN. But the bottom line is they shape that news for you based off of your taste. Now, it's sometimes we have to look at this in another way too. For example, in the news this week, it seems like all of the news outlets seem to echo the administration's lack of concern in Paris and them not sending an entourage over there when 40 world leaders were there. And I'm sorry, folks. You've been lied to again. Now, what I mean is that they took up precious real estate talking about how we don't have leadership and they're not sending leadership there. That's what you hear if you're a conservative on Fox News. And then they spun it every which way on the other broadcasts as well. And cleverly, they didn't report the finding of the black boxes off from AirAsia. Now, Cletus, during the break there, I'm so happy he's here because it would have completely escaped me. I wouldn't even have talked about this. And it was one of those things this week that really irritated me was finding out that they did find the black boxes, both the tail and the front black box from AirAsia. Both of them have been recovered. Both of them have been analyzed. And Cletus, do you know what was found on the voice recorder of those black boxes?
Well, I know, because nothing's been reported in the news, nor did I seek it out.
But that's just it. It has. It was actually in the news. And in fact, a colleague of ours, Michael Savage, reported it on his show. And you would think something as important as this right here. Now, obviously, this is on the other side of the planet, right? Yeah. So it's not really very important to the American citizens. But if I was to tell you that the pilot's last words were Allah Akbar, does that do anything to you?
No way.
Now, I mean, I'm not making this up.
No, wait a second. Wait. When this first came out, when we heard that this plane had gone down, CNN was all over it like they were doing with the AirAsia 370.
The Malaysian Air, right?
The Malaysia Air 370. And they were all over it until debris started floating to the surface and people started floating to the surface still locked in their things. And then it kind of left CNN. Whereas
hang on,
the Malaysian flight...
You're going too fast, okay?
I'm going too fast? It's that coffee you fed me.
It's the coffee, Here's the deal. Okay, let's skip from the Malaysian Air back to AirAsia because you kind of blended that. Go back to AirAsia, all right?
Right.
And what you're talking about are the bodies floating on AirAsia, not the Malaysian Air. I don't want people to confuse this show with Fox or CNN or anything like that. So we're talking right now strictly AirAsia, the one that was reportedly going through some terrible weather. Do you remember them saying this?
Yes, I remember saying that they tried to go up above the storm. We're told that they couldn't because there was too much air traffic. This is the reports coming over CNN.
Right.
In the 5 minutes I caught of this whole story, and that all of a sudden they went off the radar blip. They went down and then they went off the radar blip.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're telling me that we heard Allah Akbar, and that just throws me for a total loop.
Evidently, what we're experiencing right now is a news blackout, ladies and gentlemen. However they can do this, they're going to do it. In this case, they're using, have you ever heard, did we have 40 or so nations come into the United States after 9/11?
No.
At one time, in solidarity?
No.
Yeah, I don't remember that. We have a false flag in Paris. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
I look at what happened in Paris, the way that it was carried out, the reports that I have read since, that we can I hate to use the word assume, but we can assume it was a false flag. And the biggest clue that I have in the chain of events that happened in Paris is the police commissioner committing suicide as he's filling out the report. That's pretty heavy. Now, why was the false flag done at that time? Why, after the false flag, was this choreographed kumbaya moment with these nations? Why was the United States away from this kumbaya moment? And I'm asking you that, Cletus, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you what I think first, okay?
Okay.
I think that this whole event was done to control the news, period. To keep the left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing, because they had to do some damage control. And I base that off of this AirAsia and the Allah Akbar. Let's say you, Cletus.
I'm going to take a slightly different stance on that. The one thing I noticed, and in the past week after this whole incident, I've heard those stories about us not showing up, and I've heard a couple of those things, but the only thing I've seen with my eyes is the massive presence of militarized or a military presence in all of these countries increase. There are people walking around the city streets in their own little cities, and there are armed Army personnel with M16s walking around, talking to people, looking at people, watching everything going on. They are normalizing everybody to a military state, and that's what I see. Yes, they could be doing it to do this. They use the false flag to create the need to have more security and to up the ante and to have more of a militarized state. And they do it in Europe first.
But seriously, come on now.
Seriously.
I mean, think about it. Mm-hmm. We're in America here. We're not in Paris. Why would that be taking up so much real estate in American news? And especially, I mean, think about it. The black boxes found on AirAsia, to me, at least deserves 15 seconds on all.
Oh, yeah. It totally deserves 15 seconds. It deserves a few more than 15 seconds, especially if Allah Akbar is on there. You would think that our media would jump all over that.
Right, and that's what I was going to follow that up with. Allah Akbar adds another 15 minutes to every broadcast, I would think. Because then there's that caveat of, my God, was this terrorism?
Well, they said that they pulled up the Allah Akbar when they were the two people who shot the Charlie Hebdo, the two brothers. They were seen there's videos there's video and sound of them saying Allah Akbar, and that's what they spewed over our airwaves.
Right.
More than a couple times. And yes, it did lead to the terrorism, and then it led to the story of ISIS against Al Qaeda, that they're in competition now to see who can do worse.
When they're really part of the same.
When they're really part of the same people, yes.
And then, hey, we got a driver's license left in the getaway vehicle. Come on, man. I mean, that's really. That's all the time.
That's almost like a driver's license that's almost like a passport showing up in the middle of a building that's been exploded into 600 micron dust.
Yeah, or
particles of people.
Or how about this one? A getaway vehicle without a rear license plate. That was Oklahoma City, ladies and gentlemen. Listen, we are going to slip into another break here in a couple of minutes. Or actually, not even that long, a few seconds. The phones will open up 323-319.
It is our job to figure out what happened and do everything we can to prevent it from ever happening again.
What difference at this point does it make? What difference at this point does it make?
We weren't told they wanted more security again. We did not know they wanted more security again.
What difference does it make?
I'll make our government open and transparent so that anyone can ensure that our business is the people's business.
You're listening to the News Stalker Network.
From Washington, this is VOA News.
Okay. Now we're live.
Okay.
Yeah, we were off. Sorry
really?
about that, ladies and gentlemen. We're back. Such a good segment you just did there, Cletus. I kind of want you to go back through it again.
Okay.
Can you do that?
You want me to read the Connecticut one?
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, we are back on, and I was just watching it was in the chat, they couldn't hear us, but hey guys, we're back. Dear Lord. Technical difficulties. And we're just drinking coffee. I don't get it, man. There you go. Anyway, so from Hartford, Connecticut and the AP from Fox NY, after daily earthquakes in eastern Connecticut over the past week, officials have met to discuss ways the state can respond and residents can prepare. Officials from several state agencies said at a meeting Friday that they want to make sure Connecticut is ready. About a dozen earthquakes have been recorded in the Plainfield area in little more than a week. No significant damage was reported. The Weston Observatory of Boston College says that while the greatest earthquake activity in the United States is in the West, earthquakes are, quote, unquote, quite common in many areas of the East. Officials say residents in areas that are prone to earthquakes as if they want to pinpoint that. Should identify a safe place for shelter, secure heavy or tall furniture to walls, and know how to turn off gas and water supply valves.
Okay, and this is Connecticut, and we were while we thought our microphones were on, we were correlating a lot of news from the Connecticut area, and we apologize for that mistake on air, and it just happens, ladies and gentlemen. But anyway, Cletus, then in his wisdom, said, well, it's because of all the fracking that's going on. And then I was pretty magnificent here, and I played this right here.
Now say the western side of one of the brine caverns is collapsing, filling in from deep in the earth, causing the sinkhole at the surface to expand and contract.
On October 25th, we moved out of our home.
She and some of the 350 evacuated Bayou Corn residents packed a joint legislative hearing in Baton Rouge in recent days looking for answers. Many of the ones they keep getting are conflicting and confusing, especially from the state and the company that once mined the collapsing salt cavern, Texas Brine.
Senator, the cause of the sinkhole is the subject of pending litigation. At this point, I don't think it's proper to have any discussion about what the cause is and whether we accept what anyone has said regarding the cause of the sinkhole.
Okay, so what we have here is we've got a lot of underground activity. And, when you look at whether it's a salt mine, whether it's fracking, fracking is certainly a sexy term nowadays. I'm hearing it all the time. I'm hearing the pros and cons, but look, people are walking up to me that they can barely read that are talking about fracking, okay? And I know that there's a lot of money being invested right now into scaring the hell out of the American people in regards to fracking. My bottom line is that I don't know. But whenever I see big money going into something and manipulating, it pisses me off. We have things going on underneath our feet in regards to bases, for God's sakes. We have underground cities and tunnel networks that are just amazing. And I'm not just saying that, I've seen it. So when we have this fracking argument come up, or the hijacking of a concern of sinkholes opening up and swallowing homes or neighborhoods, I'm sorry, but if you just end your argument with fracking and you stop there, it takes away a lot of the other variables that it could be in regards to a possible pole shift. Now, I'm not one of these crazy conspiracy theory type of people, but I will tell you this. I am a truth seeker, and I do try my very, very best to look at all sources to try to find truths. Then we also have to study other outlets to see what they're not saying, what they're not talking about. Case in point, we'll go back to AirAsia. Black box found, Allah Akbar being the last words the pilot said. No story at all. Nothing. Now, if it were widely reported, Cletus, that and I hate to jump topics like this, but I'm doing this because I want to emphasize the culpability in our news media. I want to emphasize the dereliction of duty when it comes to informing the people. And there are a lot of people that go to mainline news sources, whether it be CNN or Fox or MSNBC, and they are trusting that what they're hearing is truthful. And yet over and over and over again, what we have is staged crisis actors. We have all sorts of shenanigans that, quite frankly, it's an assault to any intelligence. Now, Cletus, what would have happened if every news agency at least reported AirAsia's black boxes being found and the voice recording, that of a pilot, the last words were Allah Akbar? Would that have shaped the content of the news cycle?
I think it would have, yes.
And what types of, well, if you were going to bullet headlines or if this hypothetically say you're an editor, what would be a headline that you would probably put out there?
Who's responsible, ISIS or Al-Qaeda?
Or was this suicide?
Was this suicide?
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, if somebody's yelling Allah Akbar, taking a plane down, you would think that that's what they were saying when the planes hit the Twin Towers. I mean, we have to draw these correlations. Everybody went in an uproar here in the United States and around the world.
Oh, but you just hit a nerve.
I'm not. You were talking hypotheticals and comparisons of news stories.
They didn't find a black box in the World Trade Center.
I know they didn't, but what I'm saying is that we blame the Muslim extremists for it. And this is a pure sign of a quote unquote Muslim extremist as it's poured down our throats about why we have issues. And yet it's not being thrown all over the place, but the Muslim extremists in France who go target a comic outlet, they get all the news.
Can I pause you for a second?
Sure.
Okay. Muslim extremists. Hey, look, man, I've met a lot of Christian extremists.
Oh, yeah.
I've met a lot of Catholic extremists. I've met it's a deep pile. and
I agree with you there. Don't get me wrong.
Okay, but how do you know it was a Muslim extremist that did anything in Paris? Seriously, how do you know that to be true? Not believe it.
I don't know it. I don't know any of it.
Okay,
I'm just going off of what we've heard in the news and reporting back to you what I've heard in the news.
Okay.
I cannot for any way hear the video of them screaming Allah Akbar, even though that's what they said that was being said. Did you look at any
of their cartoons?
No, I have not seen any of the cartoons. I didn't even look them up.
I did. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And this particular paper, hey, I'll agree with the news cycle that their cartoons were very, very graphic. But I did not find Muhammad in the crosshairs to a lot of them. I found a lot of Christianity, a lot of Zionism, and a ton of Illuminati. Now follow me. A ton of Illuminati. So, you're going to kill a bunch of artists because they are being offensive. And let's hypothetically say you are a part of the Illuminati. Would you go have them murdered and screaming or holding up triangles to both have their hands and painting pyramids on their walls as they're leaving? Or would you roll it out in a way that would pin everybody against Muslims, their weapon of choice? And that's what really blows my mind, because, you know, I watch the Alex Joneses, I watch all these independent journalists because, you know, I figure it's those guys that in a collective will be part of the solution to getting people more aware and bringing the truth to surface. But when I see them, okay, they're real quick coming out and saying, hey, it's a false flag. It's a false flag, ladies and gentlemen. Look away. It's a false flag. Here's the proof right here. We've got all here's the pictures, and we've dissected this, and we see this right here. Look, no, there's no blood, yet the shot's there. There's no brain matter. Okay, they dissect this stuff, but they never come out and say, you know, a lot of these cartoons were against the Illuminati. Do you think maybe it could have been an Illuminati hit blamed on the Muslims? Let's say you, Cletus.
That makes a lot of sense.
Why not blame the Muslims?
Oh, why not? I mean, it's the hip thing to do these days. I mean, look, I remember back in the day when there was an art show in I think it was the Manhattan School.
We're going to come right back, ladies and gentlemen.
Uh-oh, missed that one.
We say we skip the news.
Bruce reporting the United States Supreme Court will decide if same-sex couples have the right to marry under the U.S. Constitution.
But there's a reason. There's a reason. There's a reason for this. There's a reason education sucks. And it's the same reason that it will never, ever, ever be fixed. It's never going to get any better. Don't look for it. Be happy with what you got. Because the owners of this...
And welcome back to News Stalker. Yeah, we've had some issues with our automated playlist device for the last hour, so we apologize for that. And I'll be watching the news so we have no dead air. And I'm so humbled to have you here this evening on the 16th day of January 2015. Again, our call-in number is 323-319-6397. That's 323-319-NEWS. Right before we went into that last song by Ozzy, which I enjoyed thoroughly, we were talking about this Paris either false flag or news event which was designed to suck the news cycle. I'm not saying that it was designed to take the news away from AirAsia's found black box with pilot's last words of being Allah Akbar. It's not what I'm saying. And now we got another thing going on here. But what I am saying, did you hear that? Did you hear that music come in? So anyway, we're not saying that the Paris event was designed to take the black box findings away, but it is quite coincidental that so much has been placed, so much emphasis has been placed on the Paris false flag, where there's so much around that particular event which pretty much shows it to be one. And we know that this particular event isn't the event that's going to catapult us into any new world war or economic collapse or it's just not. But what happened is that it did do, if you were the Illuminati, if you believe that the Illuminati exists, it certainly was a clever way to bury it. Now, right before we went into break, Cletus was talking about what he thought about the possibility of, do you think that maybe the Illuminati did the hit and blamed it on the Muslims? And sorry for cutting you off there, Cletus, but would you?
Well, it would certainly, if that were the case, and that does make a lot of sense in our own theory, purporting a theory there, it would certainly keep the world divisive. It would certainly just feed the fire that the newscasts are pitting one against the other with terms like radical Muslim, and you never hear radical Christian. But, we didn't hear these type of things when the artist was producing figures of Jesus Christ in human excrement back in the 80s. We heard an uproar against, the Catholic faith, but nobody gave two hoots about it.
And, with that said, I'm surprised that the crucifix in urine was even in the news. I mean, to me, as a journalist, you'd look at something like that and go, man, there's much more important things. Do you think? What do you think?
Back then, it didn't last that long because back in the 80s, I can't say it was much better than it is today, but it seems like it was. News stories didn't seem to keep, driving on what the Twitter feed was about. I don't know. It's really, it's daunting sometimes. And when you hear of anything that's out there just to keep us pitted against one another, it turns my stomach and makes me want to shut everything off.
Do you find it a little bit disconcerting that a lot of the so-called tips of the spears and the alternative media haven't correlated this attack on this paper and have even given any kind of cross-section of discernment in regards to, hey, this could have been an Illuminati hit? Does that raise any concerns with you?
When people get big enough or too big for their britches, sometimes when things get lost, they're on their direction and they're heading. And it may not cross their desk, it may not cross their mind, but you can bring it to their attention, and maybe they might find it worthy to go in that direction. I don't listen to those. I haven't really picked up on any of that in the past week or so because it's been all just disgusting to me.
I think they're picking and choosing.
Oh, I
think out of some it's desperation to find something to fill time. You're not going to get that on News Stalker. You just aren't. Now, number one, we've got the easiest gig in the whole thing because all we have to do is pick out the lies in the news.
I hear you. Well, we've had a request from the chat room.
Oh, yeah?
To bring up the 48 dead within 2 years.
Oh, that's an awesome topic.
I think so, too.
We're
comparing them to lemmings right now.
Well, you know, when you look at the fact, I think it's 48 in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
When you look at, and I'm just strictly talking about on the surface, when you see one of them listed as a suicide and he's got 4 nails in the back of his head from a nail gun, we got some problems here with this story. Now, I mean, I'm just going to hypothetically step out of the box and I'm going to pretend that I've got a nail gun in my right hand and I was going to put it in the back of my head and pull the trigger. I don't know how I would get the second shot off. I really don't.
Or the third one.
You know?
Wait a second. No, they said, hold on a second, in the head and torso. So he had several shots in the head and torso. Let me find that one.
He started in the torso so he wouldn't feel the head.
I mean, are you kidding me? Really? I'm sorry, after the first time you shoot yourself with a nail gun, it's pretty painful. You know, most people don't continue shooting themselves with a nail gun. It's not something that's, here we go here. Richard Talley, it's number 22 on the list. Founder and CEO of American Title Services, which were the title services for my house in Maryland. Richard Talley's death is one of the more disturbing. Richard was found dead in his garage from 7 or 8 shots from a nail gun in his torso and head. The coroner concluded that they were self-inflicted. Richard and his company were under investigation by state insurance regulators at the time of his death. Now, I'm sorry, 7 or 8 times. The reason why most men choose a real gun instead of a nail gun is because it only takes 1 shot. But how do you do 7 or 8 or 7 to 8? It's not where's the exact number? It's got to be 7 or 8. What do you mean 7 or 8?
Yeah,
how many nails are there in the body?
And you would think that, I'm just going to throw a news agency out there that has gotten lots of laughs over the years for having Monkey Boy and a stained dress, but the National Enquirer. Okay, now how come these people aren't jumping on the bandwagon? And
that wasn't Monkey Boy, that was Bat Boy.
Bat Boy, okay.
And that was the Weekly World News, and the National Enquirer did buy them out. And yes, I did read the Weekly World News every week.
You probably got a lot more truth from that.
I love that. I love that newspaper.
It's amazing. Okay, so are we going to jump on the bankers, or you want to?
I think we should. I really do. I think because we had the people in the chat room say that they would be calling in. You can get some people online here, okay. And that phone number is 323-319-NEWS or 323-319-6397. Call in now while I start reading off some of these bankers' deaths. So this is the report we got. It's from Mass Report. And it's posted January 8th of this year.
I want to pause that because we're getting ready to go into a break, right?
We're about to go on break? Okay, we'll pause that and we'll come right back with that.
Be right back, ladies and gentlemen.
It is our job to figure out what happened and do everything we can to prevent it from ever happening again.
Oh, and welcome back to News Stalker on the 16th day of January 2015. I'm pleased to have a caller on the line, which we'll get to in a second. I'm pleased to have Cletus in the house. And we've got a little bit of housekeeping right now. I want to thank those that are listening to us on the TuneIn app. Thank you so much. I want to thank the people in the chat room for being in there this evening. I want to point everybody to newsstalker.com. And I want everybody to take a few moments to kind of peruse the site. There's not really much there but one page, but that one page is packed full of a lot of information. There's archives going back over a year and a half from this broadcast with some highlighted guests that are there, which you can see. There are email links to both me and Bob. Bob is, I talked to him a couple days ago, and it looks like he may be doing a return fairly soon to at least one night during the week, which we can't wait for that, waiting with bated breath. And we've got some movies on the site. There's a featured movie, but the most important movie, I think, is State of Mind, because it basically choreographs exactly what's happening to us from a physical point of view, meaning that here we are watching the news and we're being programmed into believing things. Not necessarily given knowledge, but we're programmed to believe. We're programmed to believe that these events happened in pairs. We're programmed to believe that they're trying their best to give us the truth of either missing airlines or airlines that are shot down by countries or airlines that are committing suicide before plunging into the ocean. So what I would like to do is I would like to get to the caller in a second, but I do have an audio clip that I would like to play. It's from Christopher Green. And as soon as this is over, I want to spark up the dialogue on the bankster deaths, the possible impending economic collapse. And
they say the mic cord must be tied in now.
Really?
We've had 4 highly suspicious banker suicides over the past few weeks. Most notably with the death of a gentleman, a 50-year-old dude named Mike Duker, who had worked for Russell Investments and allegedly and suspiciously decided to jump off a bridge in Washington, according to the Associated Press. Now, of course, this has been extremely underreported by the mainstream media. You've been barely able to get a blip out of it in the papers, and nobody has been connecting the dots between all 4 of these individuals and their alleged suicides. Now, keep in mind, there is extreme turmoil in financial markets right now. Emerging markets in general, namely places like Argentina and Turkey, have been experiencing hyperinflation. Argentina's economy and their peso locally suffering a 20% loss in recent weeks. That's hyperinflation of an extreme magnitude. All things, by the way, which are going to come here to the United States at some point when we have to pay the piper of quantitative easing to infinity and 0% interest rates that have artificially supported and blew up even bigger asset bubbles than what we experienced in 2008. Now, Mr. Duker here, who worked for Russell Investments, was well known within the investment and banking community and also very highly respected. In fact, he had worked for the St. Louis Federal Reserve Bank and is literally ranked in the top 5% of published economists. He held an undergraduate degree in math from the University of Oregon, a master's degree in economics from Northwestern University, and a PhD from the University of Washington. Somehow decided to kill himself. Now, the first thought that came into my mind is, okay, maybe it's just a random event. Maybe the guy was depressed. Maybe he knows something we don't about the impending financial collapse. Maybe it's coming sooner rather than later, as most people think that are informed and that are following this sort of thing. Maybe he had lost a lot of money. Maybe he had broken up with his wife or a girlfriend or something and decided to take his own life. But what raises an eyebrow is 3 other high-level banker deaths, apparent suicides, that have been, again, grossly underreported in the mainstream media, that have also occurred within days of this gentleman's death. We have a 58-year-old former senior executive at Deutsche Bank, William Brooksmith, who was found dead on January 26 in his home after an apparent suicide. Again, you'd expect these kinds of things to happen during a crash. We saw this in 2008 where there were even some billionaires that were not only blowing their brains out, but throwing themselves and their bodies in front of train tracks. In addition to him, on January 27th, we have another individual, a director named Carl Slim, 51, who was found dead on the 4th floor of the Shangri-La Hotel in Bangkok. Police said that he committed suicide and that Slim was staying on the 22nd floor with his wife, was attending a board meeting in the Thai capital and just decided to off himself. A day later, another tragic incident occurs, January 28th, when a 39-year-old, pretty young guy, Gabrielle McGee, a JP Morgan employee, died after falling from the roof of its European headquarters in London. A fourth death. Bankers just jumping out of windows suddenly. You know, we have to ask some difficult questions here. Are these people just committing suicide because they know something that we don't? Or could it even be more perverse than that? Could it be a covert assassination operative to off these people? Maybe these people have some kind of information that governments around the world, maybe here in the United States or abroad, don't want them to get their pesky hands on. You know, what makes this even more interesting is yesterday in Argentina, after suffering massive hyperinflation in recent weeks, again with a 20% devaluation of their peso, suddenly and mysteriously and conveniently has a fire destroying highly sensitive banking documents.
Okay, my head is swimming. I'm listening to this, and I'm telling you, there must be something with the last name of Green. That's Chris Green. We had Bob Green on this broadcast. They've got a really good way of delivering some nuggets that will just make me dizzy. But without any further ado, I do want to welcome Dremlin to the broadcast this evening. Good evening, Dremlin. How are you?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing great. How are you, Eric?
We're doing pretty good. Cleus has got his chocolate. I've got my coffee, and I'm wound up tighter than an 8-day clock, ready to do some hammering. Now, you are very sensitive to this economic manipulation that's going on. That's the term that I'm going to use. And yours is from the mortgage industry. And when I talked to you before, you know, I'm very sensitive to 9/11 and the events of 9/11 in 2001. And, you had brought some attention to me in regards to what was going on the 100th floor of the World Trade Center complex at the time of the impact of the towers. But anyway, I kind of want you to introduce yourself and then, maybe hit some talking points that I might be able to engage in, because this particular story, if you will, isn't part of my all-knowing. You know, I don't have a lot of knowledge in it. There's a lot that I see from the banker suicides and the economic manipulation, whether it be in Wall Street, whether it be in the gas prices, whether it be on the shelves of our grocery stores. But anyway, welcome to the program, Dremlin.
Thank you, Eric. My name is Dremlin, and I am very, I guess, in the pit of this, what I call forgery, fraud, manipulation, securitization, Wall Street, ID theft, Social Security theft. My story is very long and not as uncommon as most people would think. About 2012, I discovered that on my land records there was mortgage fraud, and that's when I started doing research. But anyway, that continued. I would sleep about an hour a day. I wound up getting down to 60 pounds. I was dead. I was nothing but a walking zombie. I was literally dead. The deeper I dug, the more I found. And in regards to your topic with the 9/11, I don't know if you're familiar with the Security Exchange at all. Are you, Eric?
A little bit. You know, I know that the Security Exchange was closed after 9/11. I also know that in Building 7 there were SEC offices in that building. You know, the 47-story building that fell in on its own footprint, because I guess it was afraid because the towers fell. It wasn't hit by a plane. It had no raging infernos burning for days, but it fell just the same. So I've got a little bit of knowledge with the SEC.
Well, the Security Exchange, to me, is where all money, or most all money, is passed through into offshore accounts. And when I was doing my research and studying on the Security Exchange, I found where there were companies and corporations and businesses, believe it or not, and religion, churches, actually betting on how, let's say, fast the Twin Towers were going to fall.
Now you're talking about the shorts, right? The short where they were betting on, let's say, United Airlines.
They short sell it is what they call it. It's how the Wall Street goes into what they call the matrix. And they bet against each other on who's going to have, and the thing is when they bet, it goes very, very, very fast. It's like within seconds. Just like when a building falls, of course it falls a little slower or faster, but anyway, the 9/11 was set up. It was definitely set up. But and back to the mortgage stuff, it's really very complicated and hard to explain, because first you have to understand when all this came about, and actually. It really, I don't know if you have to understand what securitization is.
You're listening to the News Stalker Network.
From Washington, this is VOA News. I'm Vincent Bruce reporting the United States Supreme Court will decide if same-sex couples have the right to marry under the U.S. Constitution. Since mid-August, that country says...
It's the latest world news from VOA.
You're listening to the News Stalker Network.
And good evening and welcome back to News Stalker on the 16th day of January 2015. Joined with us on the phone is John and Dremlin, and we've got Cletus in the house as well. And what we're going to do is we're going to shift gears. We're going to go right into securitization. And for lack of better description, I would say it's a mortgage conspiracy. So I want to yield the floor to either Dremlin or John to give us some food for thought on how we can help in getting the truth to at least be echoed and sustained in the mainline news media.
First off, probably what is securitization? Back in the 80s, the banks decided they didn't want to fund any mortgages anymore because they don't make any real money at it. So they started the S&Ls, the savings and loans, and that we all know how that went. That all went bust. And then about the mid-90s, they invented this thing called securitizing the loans. The bank, they'll have a mortgage broker originate the loan is what they call it. And they buy the loan off of the originator, and they package that loan with probably 5,000 other loans. And then they sell that to another entity called a depositor, who then sells it into a trust. And these are called REMIC Trust, Real Estate Mortgage Investment Conduit Trust. And the trust issues certificates they sell, just like stocks, to investment pension funds, retirement funds, all over the world. We're talking about the largest asset-based financial instrument on the entire planet of the earth. We've got hundreds of millions of mortgages in these trusts. And last I heard, there's around 1,700 of these trusts, all with like 5,000 mortgages in it. And the laws are very specific when financial instruments are to be put into trust. They have to go through exact steps. And pretty much it's coming out that they never did any of the steps. They never actually transferred the mortgages into these trusts. The banks didn't use their own money to fund the loans. They used the investors' money to fund the loans. They got paid a commission to set up the trust. They got paid a commission to make the loans. And then they sell themselves or their services to the trust to take in the monthly payments from people's mortgages and then hand them to the investors. But, like I said, come to find out they didn't actually do any of the paperwork to transfer any of these mortgages into the trust. And this creates some really big problems. By not doing the paperwork, they violated all the IRS laws. and all the property laws that makes up all of our other laws in the United States, really. It really goes down to when you violate property laws, you violated all the laws of the United States.
Now, how rampant is this right now in the United States? I mean, are we talking 100% of the...
I would say 90% of all mortgages are securitized.
Okay.
Yeah, and I've heard that 92% of all foreclosures that have been done are actually legally void. In other words, it's as if they never existed.
Really?
Because they weren't securitized properly?
It's
yes, they weren't securitized properly.
It's fraud. It's fraud. It's literally fraud, and it's forgery.
Well, since they didn't do the paperwork correctly, they've had to hire and have firms built that do nothing but forge documentation. And we've got, I don't know if you're familiar with the Roman signing issue back in the 2010, where they found people were signing 6,000 and 7,000 documents a week. And when they get these people into a courtroom and ask them, well, you signed an affidavit. Do you know what an affidavit means? They go, no. And you signed an assignment of mortgage. It assigns a mortgage from one company to another. Do you know what that means? No. The last job they had was at Burger King. They would never know. But they're given titles of vice president of Deutsche Bank, Barclays, Wells Fargo, all the big banks. They went from Burger King to a vice president of all these banks, 20 banks, all at the same time.
Now, I remember when I bought a home many, many years ago. Actually, I bought a couple of homes. I would have to go through the whole qualification process. Then there would be this entity which always made me feel uncomfortable. That was the underwriter, or the broker to this underwriter, where they dotted every I and crossed every T. Are we saying that those underwriters may be part and parcel to the conspiracy?
Yes, we are.
There was many articles out there. You can Google it and do research on it. Most of the underwriters were actually not underwriters. They sidestepped. My lender was AmeriQuest. AmeriQuest was sued by all the attorney generals for fraud and forgery. What they found out, these are whistleblowers came forward on AmeriQuest's lawsuit that the attorney general sued AmeriQuest. AmeriQuest was closed down in 2006 or 7. They said that, okay, when you have a closing, there has to be there is contract law set in place to close. There has to be a meeting of the minds. You have to agree what is done in the contract. There can be nothing show up after you've signed. What I discovered is after a lot of homeowners signed in securitization, or what they signed, even if the contract isn't even what they really signed. With AmeriQuest, it was discovered that say if I did a closing, after they did my closing, and I had closed, and this happened to me literally, I closed on a certain day, say November 4th. So they go back to their headquarters, their little call center, their little rooms, and they're sitting there laughing and laughing. Then they take a HUD-1, and they take blank documents, and they fill in the amount of money, they fill in this, and they take your signature, they hold it up. This is what a whistleblower testified to. They said they would hold up a homeowner's signature, and they would literally scan it over, and they would create even more documents that was different from what was at the actual closing. Then, even with my case, they would take it and record it in the land records. When I discovered my stuff, I found out there was a note recorded in my land records I never saw, never signed, never knew. And it was securitized. I never knew what securitization was. And the trustee was Deutsche Bank. I go, who the heck is Deutsche Bank? Because I closed with AmeriQuest. Then I find out in November 2013, I called the Auckland, they're the servicer, they're the debt collectors, basically third party. They're the middleman to me that basically is the pass-through to send this money offshore so it's not accounted for. When I called Auckland in 2013, I said, so where are my mortgage payments going? And this little lady on the phone that works for Auckland goes, your mortgage payments is going to AmeriQuest. And I go, really? I go, how do you know that's a fact? They says, because it says so right here on my computer. And I go, okay, so what you see on your computer is my mortgage payments is going to AmeriQuest. She said, yes. I says, what if AmeriQuest is closed? Is my payment still going to AmeriQuest? She goes, ma'am, banks don't close. Well, get this. AmeriQuest has been shut down since 2006, 2007 because I was part of the legal settlement where I was paid at the time. I think my check came in 2007, but then I was uneducated. I didn't know why I got that little check in the mail. But in the meantime, this is 2013. So I talked to this lady on the phone again. I said, so you're absolutely 150% positive my mortgage payments are going to AmeriQuest? And she says, yes, ma'am. I says, well, you know what? It's impossible. I says, because AmeriQuest is gone. And so, the thing of it is, we don't even, when notes are securitized, even when you call in to a call center, which that's what the services are, to make your mortgage payment, you have an issue, you want to have a one-on-one point of contact, there is absolutely nobody to talk to. In the old days, under contract law, you sat across the table, as you were to say, Eric, you closed the closing, everything was legit, you knew that you signed everything perfect, you had somebody to call, you knew where your money was going, everything was perfect. Well, in securitization, none of that happened. None of that happened at the closing table. The person that you sent across from wasn't even who you thought they were.
You're listening to the News Stalker Network.
No matter how hard you try, you can't stop us now.
This is all securitization. Securitization actually began in the world of Germany. And Deutsche Bank is behind a lot of as a trustee for Citi, Bank of America, Citi Mortgage, AmeriQuest, Countrywide, a lot of these banks that are closed. And where is Deutsche Bank? Germany.
I still say they won the war.
Well, hey, look, that topic too.
That's a different topic altogether.
Quite frankly, there's a great book, Jim Marrs, The Rise of the Fourth Reich. But let's get back on this. All right, so, when you're talking about them holding signatures and scanning signatures, have you guys heard of DocuSign? It's where it's
DocuSign?
Yeah, DocuSign. I do a lot of, in my other life, I do a lot of consulting and things like that in the tech industry. And there are times that we have to sign contracts with entities for communications or whatever for let's just say internet service, okay? And we commit DocuSign, DocuSign. Yeah, it's a way to sign something without physically being there, and they validate who you are based off of an email that comes to you, and you say, yes, I'm this, and then you create a really cool, sexy signature that you can legally sign for things. I was asking if you're familiar with it only because I can imagine those people, if they're unscrupulous, using some type of that technology to further this conspiracy.
A real robo-signer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Sure. There's another problem with it. These trusts, the way that they're structured, they're only allowed to have money put into them for the first 90 days of their existence. A Rubik trust enjoys a no income tax status. In other words, any money going into that trust, they're the only trust that they don't pay the income tax on it. But it has to be fully funded within 90 days of its startup date. Any more, if anybody deposits even $1 into it after that, the IRS law says the entire Rubik trust is busted. And now they have to pay 100% income tax on the money that's in the trust. And we're talking about trusts that are generally around $5 billion apiece. Right? They were set up that way because that Rubik, that real estate mortgage investment conduit, the investment conduit part of that is when the monthly payments come in, they come into an entity known as a servicer. and they take those monthly payments, and they aren't deposited into the trust. They're directly sent to the certificate holders of the trust. The certificate holders, they have to pay income tax. A regular trust would pay income tax on anything coming into it, and then when a certificate holder took money out of it, he would also pay income tax. So, in essence, they are doubly taxed. That's what makes the Remick Trust so popular as an investment, is that they are only singly taxed. Now, what these robo-signers were creating, they were creating the piece of paper that says that the trust now is the owner of this note, this mortgage and note. And then they were using that to go into the courts to foreclose on people. The problem is they were creating these assignments of mortgage, giving the trust the note 2, 3, and 4 years after these trusts weren't allowed to have any money deposited into them. So, in essence, every time somebody gets foreclosed on, then that assignment of mortgage that was used to foreclose on them, that was forged, it busts the trust. And every pension fund, every retirement fund, these are the same funds that fund your cities, your counties, the state governments. All of those end up getting busted. This is a lot of where money went.
John, let me ask you something. What would happen? Sure. What would happen if? And I'm just asking for your speculation on this. If all of a sudden we had a bunch of whistleblowers come out and they, in collusion, they all came out and said, "This is what's going on," exactly what you're saying.
There have been whistleblowers out.
All right, but what would happen? What would happen to these pension funds? I mean, these people that have put their retirement into these pension funds, and do you possibly think that could be the straw that breaks the camel's back on our economic strength right now?
I have done this with 3 of the trusts. I've filled out all the forms, sent them to the IRS, sent them copies of the assignments of mortgage, laid out the whole thing for them. The IRS, from my understanding, and if you'll go to YouTube and do a search for Senator Grassley and the IRS, back in 2006, Senator Grassley was the senator that set up the whistleblower program with the IRS. And he in the video, he says, "You've only ever prosecuted one on a whistleblower claim. That one got the United States government $20 million. Why haven't you done any more?" And they just kind of shrugged their head. I wish I could remember where I heard it before, but I had heard that they went to Washington with this problem, and Washington said, "Don't enforce that law, because if you do, you will set policy."
Well, to me, it seems like something ripe for the picking, and it's almost set up to fail at whatever time they want it to fail.
Yeah.
And then if you look at all these people's pensions and their retirements, can you imagine anything more horrifying than, let's just say...
I can. Yes, I can. The derivatives market, almost $3 quadrillion derivatives market, when there's only supposed to be $364 trillion worth of dollars of wealth on the planet. Remembering it takes 1,000 trillions to make 1 quadrillion. Yeah, our economic system is toast. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense what's going on anymore. It hasn't for quite a while.
No, it does. It makes perfect sense. If you're wanting to collapse an economy, that's what you do.
Yeah, we got that. Yeah, sure enough, that makes sense. But I mean, as far as ours making economical, logical sense to keep using it, it doesn't. You know, it amazes me that we still have an economic system at all.
No, I'm of the opinion of what I just gleaned from what you were talking about, that this was set up much like wiring a building to have it fall.
Yes.
You got to get these pieces in place, and you got to set the timers just right. You got to control the media. You got to get everything kind of, get it right there teetering on the edge, and it's all got to come down at once.
Yeah, sure enough. The real question is, what's next?
That is a good question.
I mean, the sun's still going to come up, and it's still going to go down. This is not going to kill, wipe off the human race off the planet. What's next? Well, as a species, we'll find something to do next. But from what I understand, there are think tanks all over the world trying to figure out what to do about it.
I know that I've got a couple of close friends here in Santa Cruz, California, that are going through some hellish types of accountability with their mortgages, where they've made payments, and then all of a sudden they realize that these payments really aren't going in. So what they end up doing is they end up going, like I would probably do, and say, well, you know what? F you. I'm not paying you another penny until you can show me something in black and white. And they do. And then and now they're in quote unquote foreclosure, but they've been sitting in foreclosure for years.
Yes.
They're still in the home.
There's some people I know that's been in BK foreclosure for 7 years, some 10, some 12. What happens is when the bank discovers that you've got your game, they just let you sit there. They don't care. They know eventually you're going to die.
Yeah, she's right.
So they keep you trapped in that stress state of mind constantly. You can't move, you can't sell, you can't do this, you can't do that. They get you no matter what. They tie your ass up with all the bullshit, all the fraud, all the lies, everything. When I found out, when I went to my bank, when my payments were returned to me, literally returned to me. So I went to the bank, my payments were coming out of my account. And I said, you know what? No. I said, I want to see who was getting my mortgage payments. So they went, and when I started writing checks when my lender was closed down, I started having to write checks because the new servicer would not take money out of my account automatically the way my payments were originally. So I had to start writing checks. So when I found out what had happened, I went to my bank and I said, listen, I want to see my canceled checks. I want to know where my money was going. So they went and they pulled my canceled checks, and on the back of the check, it said lockbox. My banker says, what the hell is that? I go, well, I guess it's time for me to do some investigation on what a lockbox is. So I take some of these checks, and then I started looking into what a lockbox was. That my bank told me, this is what my bank told me, they told me the next time I write a check to my servicer, be sure to write on my check to whom I took out my mortgage to. So guess what? I did just that. Because they said by law, my bank should not be cashing checks to anybody that I don't write my checks to, correct?
Correct.
So when they went in there and they'd seen all these checks that I've written, and there was no name on the back of them who had cashed it, all it says is lockbox. So my next check I made out through MeriQuest, the check comes back to me. And from that day forward, they started spitting my checks back. They would no longer let me make my payments. So I called my service and I said, why are you rejecting my payments? They said, because you can't write AmeriQuest on it. I said, but that's where my lender is. That's where my payments are going. They go, you can't do that. I said, wait, can you tell me who lockbox is or what lockbox box is? They said, that's an internal system that goes offshore. Then, in 2012, I tried to do a payoff on my house. I was going to sell my house because my kids are all grown up, sell my house and just fly away somewhere to Italy, and enjoy myself in the sun. I go and decide I'm going to sell my house, and I go to get a payoff. So I get my payoff, come in the mail, they tell you payoff, gives me an address, who I would make my last payment to, pay off everything. And it says New York Mellon Bank. Has the address, the location, the routing number, the account where I'm supposed to send my final payment to pay off my house. So I'm thinking that's really strange because my original lender on my house, I built my house in 1993, was New York Mellon. Here it is, 2012, and they're telling me to pay off my house to New York Mellon. I go, what the heck? AmeriQuest is I did a refinance with AmeriQuest. Why should I pay off Mellon if AmeriQuest was my lender? So I pick up the phone and I call New York Mellon Bank, and I tell them, I says, listen, I have a claim for my house, and I have this payoff, and I have this accounting and this rounding number, and da-da-da. I says, can you pull up my mortgage and note? Because once I pay it off, I want my mortgage and note returned to me saying paid in full. So the lady on the phone, she goes in, she pulls up all the information I gave her that was sent to me from, at the time, it was American Home Mortgaging at the time, which is Auckland now. Anyway, they said, well, we don't find that account here at our bank. She says, well, then she asked me for my Social Security number, and I gave it to her. Then she asked me for my original loan number on my house. So I went and got it and gave it to her. They still could find nothing on me. So she says, well, just hold on a minute. Anyway, they wound up transferring me to about 4 people. And some guy at the top says to me, he says, listen, ma'am, he says, the routing number you have is correct. It is for our bank. He says, but I'm going to tell you right now, don't do any payoff to that account, because as far as we know, what we're finding in the back door, it goes to an offshore account, and we don't know where it's going. So I pick up the phone, get off the phone, pick up the phone, call my servicer, and I says, you know what? How am I supposed to pay off my house if I don't even know who or when I'm going to get my note back? And you know what they told me? They says, you know what? That's none of your business.
It is your business. You have a contract with them.
They said, you have no right. One more thing. I record all of my messages in Texas. All my phone conversations in Texas is very legal. So I have got tons and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of phone recordings.
And hopefully these are in multiple places.
All these say, well, trust me, I have got many, many copies, and I have got them a little scattered in different locations. I mail my stuff out, duplicates. But anyway, I get on the phone and they tell me, you know what, they told me I had no right to know, da-da-da-da. So I pick up the phone and I call HUD. I call the Consumer Protection Bureau. I file a complaint, explain to them what's going on. So when you file a complaint, of course I deal with my Texas Attorney General and everybody here in Texas. So anyway, when you file a complaint with the Consumer Protection Bureau, what they do is they take your complaint, then they forward it to your servicer, who is your debt collector. Then the servicer has a period of time that they have to respond to the Consumer Protection Bureau. So here I am waiting and waiting. So they finally barely responded by that date, the cutoff date. This is their response to the Consumer Protection Bureau. They didn't even mention my name, because I complained the fact that when I called to get my payoff and what they said, and the whole story, this is what they said. They go, we do apologize for the inconvenience, but she, it didn't say my name, is not to pay off her mortgage loan to New York Mellon Bank. That was their response. That's it. Like, really? Like, I didn't know that already? So I used to get back on the phone and call the Federal Consumer Protection Bureau, and I go, so now what do we do? It's clear evidence something's going on here. And I said, besides that, for 2 years I have been sending them already all my documents that I was discovering and finding. And they said, well, we're going to forward it to the Federal Trade Commission. So I waited about 3 or 4 days, and she gave me a case number, and I call the Federal Trade Commission, and I give them my case number, and I said to them, I says, okay, I have this case number, what's going on? Get this one. The Federal Trade Commission says, well, we have your complaint, and we have all your documents that you sent. They says, we will get back with you. So I waited about 2 weeks. I call them again, and they says, well, we're still investigating it, and for your information, this could take up to 10 years.
Whoa.
10 years. And I said to the guy on the phone, I go, what is your ID number? What is your name? What department are you in? Because I'm recording all these conversations. And so he gives me all this information. I says, now, answer me this question. Let me get this straight. You're telling me, now that my stuff has moved to you, it could possibly take 10 years for the research to be done on my complaint. He goes, yes, ma'am. I go, why? I go, could it be, maybe, could it be because 10 years is a statute of limitation for suing? And he goes, ma'am, I can't get that information out over the phone. That is privileged. And he hangs up the phone.
This is not an unusual bunch of stuff either.
absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy.
It's incredible what everybody's had to go through to find out, to get the information about where their loans actually are, who actually is legally allowed to foreclose on their home. That's why I made the comment earlier. The estimates are as high as 92% of all the homes that have been foreclosed on since about 2007 are legally void.
You guys say crazy, okay? I'm telling you, I'm not right sometimes when in my train of thought, because I'm always thinking from aspects of why is something this way? And when I look at the anatomy and what you guys are talking about, it is way too perfect of a scam to be crazy.
Oh, yeah.
It's way too perfect and framed so perfect that if it's rolled out all at once, as far as like the truth is concerned to it, if all of a sudden, we hit the mega load of truth on this topic, and then suddenly everybody's aware, I think that would be at the point to where the switch is pulled and then all those pensions are gone. So we're going to take a break right now. Hang on. We're going to take a little bit of a break right now, and we're going to come back in a few minutes, and we're going to pick up right where we left off. Thank you for listening to News Stalker. We will be right back.
I'm Vincent Bruce reporting the United States Supreme Court will decide if same-sex couples have the right to marry under the U.S. Constitution. The United States Supreme Court from Washington.
That's the latest world news from VOA.
You're listening to the News Stalker Network.
It's time for you to make a choice. Make a choice. Do you want to believe what the mainstream media tells you? If you do, then tune away now. Do you want to believe? That your government has your best interests in mind? Then go to them for comfort. But if you're a free thinker, with an open mind, who is able to look through the veil, to seek the truth, then welcome to News Stalker.
And welcome back to News Stalker on the 16th day of January 2015, episode 6 of season 2 of News Stalker. We will be having some more shows added to the lineup announced in the coming days. I'm hoping one of them announced will be my buddy Bob Grady, which I miss dearly on this broadcast. We're talking about the impending financial collapse. I would classify it as the financial conspiracy, the so perfectly designed system that can have the rug ripped out from underneath it at any moment. Now, during the break, we did a little bit of brainstorming. We looked a few things up, and it sparked my memory back when me and Bob had Lee Wanta, the $17 trillion man, on the broadcast some year and a half ago. And this was a call, and I got to set the stage here because at the time we were a three-man show. It was me and Bob and Steve, and the show basically would get out of hand at times with us joking around and doing some funny stuff on the air. And we had this phone call that came in, and it was Lee Wanta trying to get a hold of the other show that was on that network at that time. We had just newly taken over this particular spot, and he thought he was calling into a different radio station. And Steve, our partner, had answered the phone. He thought it was a joke and started to harass the guy. And I recognized, no, this isn't a joke. This is the real guy. And then when we ended up doing the scratching the surface on him, his address and everything else, it was unbelievable. But here's what he was trying to impress upon us at that time. And he was serious. He didn't want any joking around. He knew that we were on the edge of an absolute financial collapse if Glass-Steagall wasn't set back into place. Now, while we were on break, all of this kind of came up, and I had a flashback with it. I had Cletus look up Glass-Steagall. John had mentioned another acronym that was going on, and we're going to get back to that. But Cletus, can you enlighten the audience as far as what Glass-Steagall was?
So, according to Wikipedia, the Glass-Steagall Act was the Banking Act of 1933, which basically separated banking institutions from security activities. So it limited commercial bank security activities and affiliations with commercial banks and security firms, basically making banks banks and security firms security firms. And in 1999, these two portions of the Glass, or two provisions restricting those affiliations, were repealed under Graham Leach Bliley Act, the GLBA, under President Clinton.
Those rascals. John, can you elaborate on that, please?
Sure. The bankers for years, all through history, have always wanted to be in the investment game. You put your money in the bank, and it's their money when it's in the bank. They owe you money back, but it's their money, so they want to take and put that money into investments so that they can make more money off their investments. And then that's why the act was put in there in the first place, because they did it, ruined us in 29, and they've been trying ever since all the way up to Clinton's time to get it repealed. So now that it's repealed, now the bankers, now they have access to money again. So now they're going out and they're investing and making money off all their investments. It really goes into how the CEOs get paid, because they get paid by the value of their stock, and the more investments the bank makes, the better the stock prices go up, and the CEOs make fabulous money. Yeah, that's really what it's all about.
Now, to even an untrained mind, if they're processing what we're talking about right now, you know that it's unsustainable. It can't last. At some point, it's got to fall like a house of cards.
Well, you asked earlier if I could imagine anything worse, and I brought up the derivatives. But this last omnibus bill that the Republicans pushed through, before when we had the bailouts, the banks had to go to the government and get money from the government to save us. It's my understanding that in this last bill that was shoved into the omnibus, what they're called the cromnibus, what it really does is it gives the bankers access to go directly into your bank accounts when they need the money. So the next time there's a bailout, you'll go to get money out of the bank, and it won't be there. This has already happened in Cyprus, and there was a plan to do it in Italy and also in Spain.
You know what?
Some of the social stripe over there, they didn't do it.
Not to derail this, but there was one, our very first News Stalker broadcast, the topic was Iceland. And the reason why we brought Iceland up is because this particular country made some steps. They took the pain on the front end. They jailed bankers. They jailed politicians, no matter what political party they were with. And then all of a sudden, and this is because the program is News Stalker, right? Yeah. All of a sudden, this particular story fell off, and none of the majors covered it. None of them talked about it, because what it did was it gave the roadmap to how we could get our sovereignty back. And so now I'm not saying that Iceland's perfect. I'm not saying that they don't have any more challenges in front of them. But what I can tell you is that in the last 3 years, their GDP has it has surpassed above and far beyond what even their most optimistic economists were looking at. So, where are we with derivatives? John, I'll start with you.
We're screwed. I know no other way to put it.
I don't think that trading on Wall Street has no value. It's just like monopoly money. I think monopoly money has more value than anything that's out there. just like they bet, just like Dutch Bank, when their emails was discovered, they said that the mortgages that they bet on, like with mine went into in what's called Gemstone 7, Dutch Bank, I call them Douche Bank, Douche Bank went out there and they re-securitized nothing. They even said it on Wall Street. We have emails that said it. This is pigs and crap. Let's bet on it to fall.
Wow.
Because see, what happens is, if everything falls, here's the bottom line.
Let's stop right there.
Anyway.
Let's stop. Hang on one second. Let's stop right there because we got 15 seconds before we go into break, and let's pick up from that. Okay. Let's coming out of this break, we're getting ready to go into some Fleetwood Mac. When we come out, Drumlin, can you pick up right there?
Okay.
Yes, no. All right. Great.
You're
all right,
listening
ladies
to
and
the
gentlemen.
News Stalker. You're listening to the News Stalker Network.
I'm in Texas.
We know you're in.
And
Okay,
guess
we're live.
what?
We are live, ladies and gentlemen.
We are live.
Welcome back to News Stalker on this 16th day of January 2015. We're letting our hair down this evening. We're not going to be that stringent from here on out. But we were talking about derivatives. We were talking about all sorts of nefarious acts that quite frankly, to me, appear to be a economic conspiracy to completely wipe out 401ks and pension funds and retirement accounts that a lot of elderly people in this country depend upon. Drumlin, right before we went into that last break, you were getting ready to talk about the derivative market, and can you please pick up where we left off?
Yes, of course, Eric. Again, talking about short selling or derivatives, or even what they have called, I don't know if you're familiar with the credit default swaps. That was a biggie out there, where the credit default swaps was actually insurance taken on these mortgages to fall. And that's where the LIBOR thing comes in that John was mentioning about, and that I even found out that I had a LIBOR recorded on my land records anyway. But that was a credit default swap. They were put in place on these mortgages, insurance taken out on all these mortgages because they knew they were going to fall. It was all the grand plan. They knew. And the credit default swap, there was nothing backing it. Mortgages were, and that's where the bailout comes in that John was discussing earlier as well. The bailout was because our CIC was buying up nothing but dead paper. So they were buying it up. What was it? I forget what it was. Billions a day. And because they knew there was nothing there. There was nothing there but blank paper, and they knew, just as you're saying, Eric, what is going to happen with the pension funds. There's no money there. There was nothing there to begin with. So the credit default swap and the derivatives with insurance, with bet for it to fall, because once it falls, everything falls. They make money. They keep making money off it. And the reason no bankers go to jail in the United States is because this is higher up than the bankers. Because the REMIC was put in place by Congress. The REMIC is the pass-through through the IRS to money laundering offshore. It was Congress that invented the REMIC. Congress.
Can you repeat that acronym?
Than the banks.
You said REMIC?
REMIC.
Can you?
Real Estate Mortgage Investment Conduit.
Okay, say it again.
Real Estate Mortgage Investment Conduit.
Okay. Yeah, because I think a lot of listeners. Go ahead.
That's part of the securitization process is the REMIC. Because it has to go from A to B to B to C. And you'll never see any of this information in your land records. All of this went down on your mortgage and note, and usually it was all pre-planned before you even signed that contract. And if you even look, when I did research, when I discovered all this, I started doing research on other people's mortgages and notes, and I would actually do land record audits, and I would go read the closing papers, and I started to see a system with all of them where it would say in there that it wasn't in long time ago contracts before all this stuff was created. It says in one paragraph, I can't remember the paragraph now, but it says on your contract, and many mortgages, that your mortgage and note can be sold in part or. Now, a mortgage and note, a deed has to follow the mortgage and note. It has to stay together always, always, always. Now, when the securitization is, they separate the mortgage and note. So it is in your contract that they can sell in part. In part means that they're splitting the mortgage and note. There is no secured lien or no land behind the debt, because the debt is sold over and over and over and over and over. And they do that even by changing the loan numbers, which I discovered that in the security exchange, and called out a few people higher up along the stream what they were doing. And when I discovered that they were doing it, and I called these people out because I found their phone numbers on the security exchange, they thought I worked for the FBI, believe it or not. It was unbelievable. But anyway, back to where I was. I'm getting way off topic. This is just so many roads to go down. Derivatives, there's nothing there. I mean, they want everything to fall. Simple. Because they want us so poor, no jobs, no nothing, that we have to keep depending on whatever they want to offer us. We have no choice.
Well, that'll be revolution. We'll need to bring Mr. Manning up on that one.
But see, that's what's happening. Think about it. That's why all the military in place. That's why everything, it's all perfect. It starts, I mean, yes, 9/11 was in it. It all of it's a big picture. And to study the security exchange, it's a pass-through window where everything passed through, and that was set up by the government. The WMIC was the government. Our senators, Congress, the FDIC, the FHA is on the board of directors of right now Ocwen. Ocwen is a servicer that is crashing. Ocwen took on all these mortgages as the servicers for Citi, for Wells Fargo, for Bank of America, for Deutsche, for everybody. And they knew what was going on. They literally backdated documents, created fraud. Now this dude's coming up, Mr. Ferris and Mr. Irby, not Ferris. Ferris and I have had our chats. And Mr. Irby, he's going to take the fall because Ocwen was put in place by the FHA, which I discovered this in 2012 when I tried to share. The FHA put Ocwen in place. In 1999, I discovered that when this stuff all hit the fan, Ocwen was going to become the servicer, buy up all this fraud debt, all this crap, and then it was going to take the fall. And that's exactly what is happening right now. So that all the banks that have sold all their stuff to Ocwen as a servicer, it falls and collapses and go BK. Nobody can sue, nobody can go after the top, and nobody can really reach up and touch what's really happening while everything else starts crumbling. It's unbelievable. The FHA was in on it. All the attorney generals are aware of it. All the senators, I mean, all of them. You know that every attorney general in every state has sued almost every servicer at least once. My loan mortgage alone, I have had 3 servicers. All servicers have been sued for some kind of misrepresentation, charging late fees, not taking payments, losing this, losing that. They've been sued by the attorney general 3 times on my mortgage alone. I sit down and I think my Texas attorney general has made 3 times settlements off of suing the servicers for fraud and this and that. Yet, the homeowners still lose their house. But think about this. This is going on in every state, every country. I have a group that's private and on Facebook, and I have some friends from Africa. I was trying to help them find their notes that were securitized in Africa. Their notes, their banks literally just caught the whole bank on fire to destroy the notes. The whole bank caught on fire.
And it's not.
They are part of my group, and I have literally helped them find their stuff. And they have a group on Facebook too that is all from Africa, and it's unbelievable.
And yet the news and the media is silent.
Yes, exactly right. That's right.
And have you gone to your local news and asked them to do an expose?
Oh yes, let me tell you what happened. When I found out that when I discovered that when I found out that when I tried to do my payoff on my note and all that stuff happened, you know what? That's when I went to my land records to find out what was going on with who had my mortgage and out, because nobody knew. So I went to land records and I pulled my information, and I found robo-signers and all this stuff dated back in 1993 on my land records. And I discovered that Fidelity is involved with that, and that's another story all the way down. Fidelity, oh my God, Fidelity. But anyway, so I found out that my stuff was securitized all the way back in 1993 on my land records. Here it is, I'm waking up in 2012. You talk about a heart attack. I started hyperventilating. I'm on my county, Williamson County, where I live, in my land records, going through my land records, reading all this stuff right in front of my face. I called the register over to my computer, because we pull it up on a computer, named Nancy. I said, look at this. What the hell is this shit? How could you do this to me? I mean, I was screaming and hollering, and she looks at me, and I says, I want certified copies of everything right here. I want certified copies. Okay, so I had to leave my computer and go up to her desk. She goes up to the desk, and there's this realtor standing in front of me, and he got his printed copies of whatever the heck he was getting, and he leaves, and all of a sudden she turns around, she goes, I'm sorry, ma'am, but we can't give you certified copies today. Our machines are just currently down. I go, excuse me? I go, that person that just walked out of here got certified copies. He goes, well, you're going to have to come back tomorrow. I go, no. I go, I want them right now. And Nancy said, no, you can't have them right now. You're going to have to come back. So I said, fine. So I leave. Okay, the land records is at the courthouse where I live. So it's in the basement. So I went upstairs, went through security and everything, went out to my vehicle, and I'm standing there, and I had this panic attack, and this fire came over me, and I go, no. And I turn around, walk back in, go back down in the basement, go over to the computer to turn it on so I can pull up my information, my land records, and there's this guy sitting on my computer with my land records pulled up. And I go, excuse me. I go, who are you? And I go, that is my land records. That's all my stuff you're looking at. I go, who are you? And he goes, oh, and he stands up and he shakes his hand and he says, I am the district attorney for their county. Sitting in my chair, the district attorney. She had went and got the DA. Shortly after that, we have an audit done in our land records. I was at the commissioner hearing. There's a David Kruger that was on, John, what is that show that he's on? The show that you know, too, that you have the bumper sticker on, Eric? What's that show?
Oh, InfoWars. But hey, you know what? We're getting ready to go into...
Yes, he was on InfoWars. Anyway, he's there. He did help do the land audit. Some of the attorneys that were there that did the land audit, of course,
pause right there. Pause right there, because we're about 10 seconds shy of going into one of our last breaks for the evening. And I'm telling you what, man, I'm getting dizzy from all of this. But anyway.
You're listening to the News Stalker Network.
From Washington, this is VOA News. I'm Vincent Bruce reporting the United States Supreme Court will decide if same-sex couples have the right to marry under the U.S. up across the board. On the NASDAQ, also the Dow. I'm Vincent Bruce reporting from Washington.
That's the latest world news from VOA.
You're listening to the News Stalker Network.
What difference at this point does it make?
And welcome back to News Stalker. This is going to be, or that was our last break of the evening. So thanks for being patient and sitting through the lies of the news. We play the news on this broadcast because we are pointing out what they aren't talking about. And anybody that's concerned about the fiscal health of this nation right now should be listening to this broadcast and trying to make heads or tails of this financial conspiracy. That's what I'm going to call it. It's way, way, way too perfect. It's way too intertwined with every aspect of our living. And it's, in my opinion, something that has been set up in order for the button to be pushed, much like the button that was pushed on 9/11 of 2001. At some point, somebody gave a green light to that. We are paralyzed in many ways, especially if you do watch the mainline news, whether it be Fox or CNN or MSNBC, because in some ways, we're shielded from these types of realities. And if you really think about the collapse of the mortgage market, which is being held to a lot of, actually the vast majority of our pension plans and our 401ks, and you can imagine that all collapsing at one time, then it wouldn't take long to figure out that would be the Armageddon that a lot of people within the United States of America have been warning about, whether it's on their subject of a FEMA camp that was set up within miles of their home, or fill in the blank. There are so many different opinions of what is going to happen, or what gives the news of military surplus in towns any credibility. Well, obviously, if we're having a race war, that would be one. If we're having an economic collapse, that would be something else. But in something of this magnitude, that's pretty much affecting 92% of mortgage holders in the United States of America, nearly 100% of those that have pensions or 401ks. This is very, very important. So when we're looking at our news media, not even talking about, Cletus earlier was going over the 48 or so deaths in the last 24 months, one of which I just don't know how you get that second nail off in the back of your head. It's just really hard for me to imagine that. But
after 6 or 7 to your torso,
right? It's hard for me to fathom this. But all the same, it is happening. So we know on the surface that we have our news agencies blacked out, if you will, of talking about certain topics, one of which I guess would be Iceland, because we don't hear anything of that in the news, even though the GDP is growing at remarkable rates. And when we're looking at what I'm considering to be unsustainable on the surface, I don't know where we go from here. I don't know. We talked prior to this last break about, have you contacted local news mediums? And I guess the answer to that was yes, and that they didn't even try to even touch it. Is that correct?
No, I'll tell you what happened. No. That's where I got off track. I was at my land records. We had the audit done in the land records, and they had a hearing at the commissioner hearing, and the news was there, and the attorneys was there, and David Kreger was there, and but anyway, after it was over, and in fact, I was fixing to share it in chat of the land audit. I remember I shared it with you, Eric. I'm going to share it in chat of the audit. It's a video. And anyway, the news was there. After it was over, what channel was it? Channel 3, I think, here in Texas, comes up to me, and she asked me if I would meet with her. And I said, sure. So I met with her. And we talked for hours and hours, and she recorded all this stuff. And then later I was waiting to see it, and then I called her and I go, okay, when are you going to air this? And she says, well, my higher up management told me to destroy all the film, everything.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Wow. So, and that was that the end for you, or did you approach anybody else after that?
Say that again?
Was that it? I mean, so after that happened, no other stations or broadcast networks were approached after?
Well, you can find, I can pull up some, it's crazy because, okay, I contacted her again. About a month ago, I got a letter in the mail from my servicer saying you're offering HAMPs here in Texas, and HAMPs and mods are the biggest scam also in there. But I just shared the link and chat on the audit that we had on our land records. But anyway, they sent this letter Because they're wanting homeowners to do these mods enhanced because if they're trying to cover up the original scam, the original fraud, they're trying to create a new debt so that they can have some validation with your signature on it that it exists. They're trying to create a new contract. At the same time, they're not letting the paperwork go through, and then they put you in foreclosure. But what happened was I get this letter in the mail, and then some company here in Texas was joining with Ocwen to do mods and hamps. So I'm looking at this, I go, no, this is impossible. Ocwen cannot do a mod and a hamp because I have ID theft, I have fraud, I have forgery. So I pick up the phone and I call them. I go, you can't do a mod and hamp with me. I says, I've already proven fraud and forgery, and most of these homeowners have too. I go, how can you do that? So the guy on the phone, he was from Dutch Bank. He's from Dutch Bank. He goes, well, he says, we can do whatever we want. We can help you. We can get you in a new loan. We can fix this and fix that. I go, no, you're not getting it. You can't fix anything. You don't have the authority. You're not the beneficiary. You don't hold the mortgage. You have no authority to do anything. He says, well, just come on down here and we'll talk about it. And then Ocwen calls me right after that, hung up the phone. And they says, well, so are we going to see you tomorrow? And I said, this was a Saturday, and I says, I don't think so. Well, what I did is I went. I put on a wig. I went down there. I had scanned and copied a whole bunch of papers of the land audit, a whole bunch of other stuff, and I started handing out all this paperwork to homeowners that were at this meeting. And all of a sudden, these people are over in the corner with me, talking to me. The police show up and tell me I have to leave the building or I'm going to be arrested. And anyway, back up, I called this same person that did the news for the news here, for the land commission, and they talked to me. I called her to be there. She showed up. They wouldn't even let her on the property with the cameras.
Wow.
I mean, it is just crazy.
It's amazing.
Well,
it's not amazing. Yes, it's amazing, but it's really, really happening. And the fact that Ocwen now, Mr. Irby admitted that they backdated documents, that they forced homeowners into foreclosure. He literally admitted it. I go, wow, I need to call this company that joined with Ocwen and say, well, where do you play in this, huh? In fact, I made a call to Dutchy Banky Bank today and asked him, well, are you still holding hands with Ocwen? And the guy hung up on me.
You're
they know
ruthless.
my name very well. At Dutchy Bank, they know me very well.
I don't know. I think you're not too thoughtful there, Gremlin. You're pushing too many of their buttons at once, and they may tilt.
Well, that's why I got a phone call.
Well, that's what they're doing with us.
No, here's what I got. I got a phone call. This guy calls me on the phone, and he says to me, he says, you need to stop sending, because I started writing Irby and Ferris. They're from Ocwen. They're the top. They're the guys that are crashing. And Wilbur Ross, he's the one from American Home Mortgaging. The FHA was on the board of directors. I found out the FHA was sitting on the board of directors because I pulled all this stuff up in the Security Exchange, and I seen just how deep it was and who is on the board of directors of Ocwen. So I started calling out their numbers and what was going on. I get this phone call, and somebody called me and says, you know what, you need to stop sending your certified mail to the top. You need to stop talking. You need to stop doing what you're doing. And I go, or what? They go, you need to just do it. And I just laughed. I go, no. And I hung up the phone.
So
That was about a month.
What advice, I'll start with you, John, what advice would you give our listeners that may be dealing with some of that right now as far as they're having a hard time with their lender?
First, get a copy of your local court records.
Okay.
Courts, not the records, I'm sorry, but the rules. The courts in every county have their own rules, and you got to know what these rules are, and fight. Do not just go quietly into the dark. You can get a year of free living in your house just by answering the paper that you get in the mail. If you'll just write up an answer to it saying, yeah, they lied about this, they lied about that. That's all you got to do, because what it does, it takes it from the pile that the judge sits there and rubber stamps foreclosures in, and it puts it in another pile where a judge has to bring you into court and bring the plaintiff into court and actually have a trial court. And it takes about a year for them nowadays to get through that pile. So if you do nothing else, just answer that first one. That way you can live in the house for probably a year for free.
Save some money.
Yeah.
But even that's not sustainable. So
no, no, it's not. No, it's not. But there is so much information now. I run a Facebook page. Dreamly runs one. There's some great sites. msfraud.org is a wonderful site. It's got hundreds. msfraud.org. It stands for mortgage servicing fraud. Right. And you go into their legal lands, there's hundreds of cases that homeowners have won. Homeowners all the way across the nation are actually winning foreclosures. They're getting their houses back. They're getting tens of thousands of dollars in damages on top of the free house. They have to sign non-disclosure papers to get this, and that means nobody knows about it. Right? You've got to be in with the group that it's actually happening to actually know about it. I'm in with some lawyers, and they feed me this information. That there are people all over the nation winning back free homes and getting tens of thousands of dollars. Mary McCulley is a Montana case. She got back either $5.1 or $6.1 million along with it because of all the fraud that's been committed, and it's pretty easily proven. We've had a horrible time with the judges believing us. We bring it out and we lay it out in front of them. I was one of the people that was involved with the original robo-signing research. And we laid thousands of documents in front of the judges, and we got 20 signatures of the same person and none of them match. And yet the judges will go, oh, well, whatever, you lose your house. So it's been a really major uphill battle, but the snowball is rolling and it's growing bigger and bigger.
You know,
so there is hope.
Here's what I'm finding, John. I'm finding that the American people are unaware that there are that many foreclosures. And what I do know is true out here in California, the real estate agents are lobbying with the banks for them to continue to hang on to these foreclosed properties and not allowing them to come back into the marketplace for resale, because they know that the properties coming back on the market will then drive prices down because of the availability of your housing inventory. So
there's another side of that though, and that is the banks are now required to carry 4 or 5% of an asset base. To go against all the debts they're making in the stock market. Well, the real estate that they're holding is part of that asset base. And if they flood the market with real estate, it lowers their asset base. Now they have to sell investments and put cash into it.
True. Plus also when a bank sells a foreclosed home, they have to then write off that loss. And the banks have not been writing off the loss, even though that they were supposed to write off the loss when they got the bailout. That's what the bailout was for, was to write off all these bad loans. And that didn't happen. So the banks are waiting until the house price can sell a little at a time. The banks don't want to flood the market either because they will lose a lot of money themselves.
Right. And there are a whole lot of other really interesting issues to this whole crisis that we're not going to be able to address tonight. There's just not enough time.
We'll just have to.
I'll be glad to sit down with either one of you and talk anytime you want to about the entirety of this thing.
No, maybe we should probably put a special together. You know, we should probably spend some time, put a special together, one that would have a remedy, a way for that mortgage holder to live through this. Even more scary to me is when I think about the reverse mortgage market.
Oh, dear God.
Yep.
To me, that's terrifying.
They're in it bad. Yep.
I talked to somebody. I talked to somebody recently who said, "Yeah, my sister has a reverse mortgage, and yeah, I'm thinking of doing that too, so that I can stay in my house and that I can still give it to my kids." I'm like, "No. When you die, somebody's giving you money for that house. Somebody's paying you back, and they're buying your equity is what they're doing. And if you, whatever you give to your kids, if they want that house, they have to buy it back from the bank. He's like, what? I'm like, yes, that's what a reverse mortgage is.
There are instances where a reverse mortgage is a good thing. I can't kill the whole market. I have no, let's say, hypothetical, I have no kids, I've got a $300,000 home. I don't want to move. I don't want to sell it. I need the money, though.
Right.
And it doesn't matter what happens to this house. Okay, that's a perfect example of the great thing that a reverse mortgage is. It's a way for somebody to get that money.
Well, okay, but you're missing my point. I'm not talking about the pros and cons with a reverse mortgage, but the nefarious acts underneath the hood that are going on with these reverse mortgages. How
we have got to talk about One West Bank and how they bought IndyMac, which is a bunch of reverse mortgages. They bought it for 70 cents on the dollar. They got a special deal from the FDIC. The FDIC will guarantee them 95% replacement of their loss, and they're doing it on the value of the loan, not on what IndyMac paid for it. Got that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
A $100,000 loan, they get to buy it for $70,000. But the FDIC, if they don't sell the house, if they just write off the complete loss, the FDIC writes them a check for $95,000 for something they paid $70,000 for.
They just made money.
This is one of the backdoor bailouts that is not in the news. And there's lots of them. The whole mod thing. There's only been like 6-7% of all the foreclosures ever got mods. What happened is the feds are paying the banks, I guess, $1,300 for every application for modification. And then they don't have to make the mods. And Bank of America was actually giving away $500 Target gift cards to their employees who denied the most loan modifications.
I think it's time for a lot of vodka.
No, I can't drink.
There are so many interesting facets to this thing that we're going to have to sit down and we'll go through a bunch of them. You can pick out the ones you want, and then we'll do it on the air if you like.
Well, I think what needs to happen is that it needs to be made user friendly. You almost have to use a kindergartner's approach to it, because you got to remember, these people, man, they are absolutely programmed out of the awareness of it. Their consciousness is very narrow. And that's based off of, it's just, look, where are they going to the well for their news? And what we've got going on right now is we've got, every amount of hysteria you can imagine on the news, except for something that is knocking on our door right now. And I'm of the opinion that this will be the catalyst. This will be the button that's pushed in order to, and look, we don't have to deny it. They want one currency on this planet. That's the bottom line. Once you have one currency, then you have no borders, now do you? So here we go. So I'm going to give you guys the floor, and then we're going to be done with this broadcast. I'm going to give, we'll start with Dremlin. Do you have any parting words this evening for the listeners?
Yes, I do. First, don't give up. No matter what, there's always a better way. It's horrible out there. But at the same time, you know what? If we stick together, we can rise above and we can rise above all of this.
Very well said. John?
Money's a creation of man. We created it. We can fix it. We can reinvent it. We've got options. It is not the end of the world, but it is something. The courts believe that we have rights only if we defend those rights. If people won't defend their rights, then they have none. That's just the way it is. So, fight. Do whatever it takes. Fight. That's my party advice. Fight.
That's good advice. Cletus?
Freedom is not free. Apparently it costs a hell of a lot of money, especially when you go get a mortgage. Now, I can tell you right now, I'm going to go down to my local courthouse on Monday or Tuesday, and I'm going to be researching my whole mortgage and making sure that it is clean and clear.
Hey, I can help do securitization search for you for free. Most securitized audits charge $1,500 to $2,500 to do a search. I'll do it for free for you.
I really appreciate that. How do I get a hold of you?
Well, I will let you know.
Okay. Sounds great.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the 6th episode of Season 2 of News Stalker, or FNL, if you're paying attention to the Friday Night Live. And we're greatly appreciative of the two guests, John and Dremlin, especially, shedding some light on a subject that is being carefully hidden and that is so pivotal on... Look, if you were to look at the senior citizens that depend on these pension funds, and we've been warned, we've heard it on the other broadcast networks, and I'm speaking of, let's say, the InfoWars broadcast with Alex Jones, they will say that the mortgage crisis, but they'll say that we're getting ready to enter in an economic downturn, and they talk about the pensions being grabbed by the government, but they don't really finish the thought of saying that the pension funds as they are were set up to fail, and it's not necessarily the big bad government going after them. It's the faulty system that was put in place on purpose so that the button could be pushed to completely wipe out wealth, to completely wipe out savings, wealth, retirement, everything else. So with that said, I want to bid everybody a good evening. Thank you for being on this broadcast. We'll be back next Friday. Good night.
Thank you. God bless.
Thank you, Jeff.